Hello, nerds and politically curious folks. Welcome back to the DepDiv Podcast, where I, your humble host, Yadada, bravely stare into the dumpster fire that is world politics so you don't have to. Or at least, you get to watch me flail around it like a cat trapped in a room full of laser pointers. We're going to dive into a source that starts by looking at the aftermath of an election, but trust me, it quickly gets into a much bigger, much juicier idea about how we all think, or maybe don't think, about politics.
So right out of the gate, the source asks this question: can one election really tell you where a whole country is headed? And the answer is a big, fat no. It argues that trying to make these huge, sweeping predictions based on one local or midterm election has always been, a bit of a pointless game. And here's why. The source makes this really smart distinction between a wave and a trend. A single election result? That's just a wave. It's a temporary splash, makes a lot of noise, gets everyone excited or upset. But a real trend? That's the actual tide turning. And you can only see that by watching what happens over multiple elections. Confusing a wave for the whole trend is one of the biggest mistakes people make.
Okay. This leads us to a fantastic metaphor the source uses to frame this whole discussion about how different political systems work.
This is just brilliant. The source says that democracy often feels like you're being forced to choose between two rotten apples, right? Neither candidate is perfect, they've both got flaws. But in an autocratic system, you're just handed one shining golden apple, a leader who is presented as flawless, perfect, the only option.
But here is the massive twist. The source argues that, choosing a rotten apple feels kind of bad, but it's that very system, that imperfect choice, that lets people actually live their lives freely. Meanwhile, it's that supposedly perfect golden apple, the leader you can't choose or vote against, that historically leads to one man-made catastrophe after another.
And that idea of rejecting supposed perfection brings us straight to the key concept in this whole piece. It's a term for a very specific and pretty concerning style of political thinking that we see all over the world today.
And this is it, the political diode. Now, in electronics, a diode is a little thing that only lets current flow in one direction. The source uses this to describe a political mindset where information works the same way. It's all black and white, good versus evil. There's zero room for complexity. Information can only flow in the direction that confirms what you already believe.
So what does this actually look like? Well, it's not just about having strong opinions, it's a whole pattern. People with this mindset form an almost parent-child bond with their favorite politician. Their opponents aren't just people they disagree with, they are mortal enemies. And it makes them totally incapable of seeing any flaws on their own side or any good points on the other. The source argues this comes from what it calls a party-state education, which teaches you to see the world as a simple us versus them battle.
So now, let's see what happens when the source takes this diode idea and applies it to two political groups that on the surface look like complete opposites. This is where it gets spicy. Okay, let's talk about the aftermath of the most recent election day in America. You've got the usual American chaos, and then you've got the Chinese-speaking internet audience weighing in. And there's a pattern here. The source uses this amazing phrase from a Chinese rock song to say that China's nationalist Little Pinks and American Trump supporters are essentially eggs hatched under the red flag. They are basically two sides of the same coin.
And this table just lays it out so clearly. Look at the parallels. Both groups attack all mainstream media as biased, leftist media. Both get their information from unreliable online self-media. Both think in that binary us versus them way. And the result, according to the source, is that their brains effectively become an information garbage can.
The source then points out that this binary thinking isn't just limited to those two groups. This diode pattern shows up in some other pretty unexpected places.
This quote is so insightful. It suggests that even people who fiercely oppose a system, like the Chinese Communist Party, can end up becoming a mirror image of the very thing they're fighting. They adopt the same black and white tactics. See, it's easy to just oppose something, but to actually deprogram your own mind from that way of thinking, that takes real effort.
And then there's this concrete example of what the source calls a special kind of schizophrenia. It points to some immigrants who directly benefit from a government policy, like Obamacare, but at the same time have this intense, passionate hatred for the politician who created it.
And this is a huge deal.
because we're talking about massive numbers. According to the source, at least 43% of the U.S. population uses government-funded or subsidized healthcare. This context just makes the fierce opposition from some of the people who are benefiting all the more baffling, and it really shows the power of that diode mindset. Tribal loyalty can completely steamroll personal self-interest.
All right, folks, quick break before I get myself banned from literally every social media platform. If you're enjoying this, consider hitting that subscribe button. Or leave a review. Heck, leave two. One for me, one for my therapist. Okay, so if this diode thinking is so powerful, what does the source suggest is the way out? What's the antidote?
First, the source calls out what it labels political infants on both sides of the spectrum. When the far left loses, they blame the voters for being stupid. When Trump supporters lose, they claim the election was rigged. You see the common theme? It's never our fault. The mistake is always someone else's. It's a complete inability to self-reflect, because we are always correct.
And this brings us to the ultimate answer the source provides. The antidote is intellectual humility. It's summed up perfectly in the wisdom of Socrates. True wisdom is simply knowing that you are ignorant. It's the complete opposite of the political diode's absolute certainty.
So that leaves us with a final thought. Where else in our lives do we see this binary diode thinking preventing any real understanding? All right, that's enough snark for one day. Remember, folks, it's all part of the human comedy. A big, glowing, sarcastic thank you to my producer, FireflyHaku, who somehow made me sound coherent. Thanks for listening, nerds. Keep your brain sharp, your sarcasm sharper, and until next time, this is Yadada signing off from the DepDiv Podcast, where nuance goes to die, but humor survives.